you to everyone. I am Rabbi Stacey Blank, the Director of Education and Leadership Development for the World Union for Progressive Judaism. And today I'm going to be sharing the results of our discussion, our roundtable discussion from the Connections Conference that was held in Jerusalem in May of 2023, where we presented the central values of the World Union for Progressive Judaism and held over 20 roundtable discussions about these values. And today's value is the value of community. So I'm going to share the presentation. I'm going to make a presentation and share the results of our roundtable discussions and people's input into our value of supporting communities of shared value and practice. And today, more than ever, this is an important value as we gather in community and support not only our communities, we support Israel and support our global community. So before getting into the text, I want to share what people by and large found to be the unifying factors in our value proposition, what they liked in our text. One concept that everyone gathered around was the aspiration to be inclusive and welcoming. That is a central value of our communities. Another central value that people by and large agreed on, that youth are a major and integral part of our communities. We also had general agreement that we believe in outreach. Our communities are open and welcoming, and also we seek to reach out and bring people into our communities. And finally, an overall statement that people overall agree with this value, and people's main questions and concerns were more about implementation. How do we actually do this value? So I'm not sure that we'll completely answer that in this discussion, but it's an important thing to think about as we consider what are our values and how do we bring them to reality, which is what we want to do in the end. So I'm first going to introduce the text, which this is the revised text based on all the feedback that we got from the reporting forms at the Connections Conference. So I called this page our Mishnah. This is explaining in straightforward language what is the value without any explanation. And our next page will get into more explanations as how we arrived at this text. So here is our revised value of supporting communities of shared values and practice. Flourishing and inclusive communities. The WPJ supports its regions and communities in creating and sustaining ideological homes for reform/progressive Jewish values, education, culture, identity, leadership, and spiritual growth. We promote active and engaged volunteers and professionals, as well as outreach to unaffiliated Jews, whether they were born Jewish, chose Judaism, married into a Jewish family, or found their way to their grandparents' heritage later in life. We empower both traditional and innovative approaches to and definitions of community. The WPJ affirms the equality of all Jews, everyone created in the image of God, recognizes the diversity of our communities, and encourages involvement of LGBTQ+ Jews, Jews of color, and families of multi-faith backgrounds who share our values of progressive/reform Judaism, and also Jews of people with disabilities. We'll see that in the next page, but that should be here as well. Empowering our youth. The WPJ supports the Netzer Olami youth movement and Tamar Olami movement for young adults and provides platforms for their education and leadership development. We also work with communities to integrate young people into leadership roles in the wider progressive/reform Jewish community on a local, regional, and global level. Okay, so now I'm going to take you to my Gemara. Okay, the traditional, in the spirit of the traditional Talmud text that we bring into the discussion, all of the different opinions and how they inform this new text. And so first of all, the text, I also edited and refined it to reflect the actions of the WPJ, not just what is progressive Judaism, but what is the role and what guides the WPJ as an organization, as a worldwide entity in its mission. So if we start at the beginning and we look at how the comments informed our text, flourishing and inclusive communities. The WPJ supports its regions and communities in creating, sustaining ideological homes for reform/progressive Jewish values, education, culture, identity, leadership, and spiritual growth. That is from the original statement. We promote active and engaged volunteers and professionals. So if I follow the line there down to the bottom right-hand corner, one of the comments was bringing to emphasize different components of what makes a community, volunteers and lay leadership, and that was the comment to highlight volunteers, and I said, okay, we have volunteers and we have professionals. So taking that comment of the value of volunteering versus leadership development, saying, I think the statement here is not that it's about developing leaders, but just that people come and they're involved, whatever level of leadership they have. And we want not just that people come and be members, we want them to be active members. That's the second part here. Make members more active/engaged and focus on active membership. And so that is that comment added in there, active and engaged volunteers. And again, if we have volunteers, then we should also mention our professionals, as well as outreach to unaffiliated Jews, whether they were born Jewish, chose Judaism, married into Jewish family, or found their way to their grandparents' heritage later in life. And that's from the original statement. No changes here. We embrace both traditional and innovative approaches to and definitions of community. So my line down here goes to this comment in the top left, that there was a comment that technology and the digital world require their own statement. I did want to acknowledge that, and I think certainly in our global community, technology is tremendous gift that we can meet like this. And I didn't want to be too specific. I left the word innovative there, and I hope that people would know that includes the digital world, technology, and all the blessings of modernity. And we embrace traditional approaches. We could say meeting face to face is a traditional approach, as well as many others, what we do in our communities, our Jewish traditions, our prayers, etc. And the WPJ affirms the equality of all Jews, everyone created in the image of God. This was a statement. I'm looking for it now. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. On the right-hand side, there was a suggestion to, when we talk about inclusion, to use the language of we affirm the equality of all Jews. And I think that works well. We're talking about community. When we meet in community, we want to come as equal partners. And in previous discussions, we've talked about that it adds to our statement when we reference our Jewish sources. So here I added the idea from our tradition, from the creation story, that everyone is created in the image of God, to complement the statement of equality. Recognizes the diversity of our communities. This is a statement that has come up in almost every single value discussion, that we have to recognize in all things that we say that every community is operating in different environments, different countries, different laws. And this was especially emphasized here. We need to recognize that things are different between communities because of laws. for example, our friends in countries where certain things are just not allowed to do. Maybe we'll discuss that more later. And encourages involvement in LGBTQ plus Jews. We had a different, I think we had this statement LGBTQIA, and someone suggested it's more appropriate to write LGBTQ plus. There was a few options given. I thought this was the simplest. And I'm happy for anyone to tell me if there's a more appropriate way to write it. Jews of color. It was suggested to also add people with disabilities. We need to accommodate disabilities, is the statement at the bottom. And I think that is a great addition to our statement when we talk about inclusion, because it also talks about how do we design our synagogues and our institutions to make them accessible. And also, when we talk about how we deal with education of children in all different facets, what it means to be community, and families of multi-faith backgrounds. And here we had been using the term interfaith, and there was a number of comments that we should be evolving our term, and there were a few suggestions where that term could be. So here's one of them: change interfaith to a multi-background. And I thought it would be the most clear to write multi-faith backgrounds who share our values of progressive/reform Judaism. So this last phrase I relate to here. I'm in the bottom middle. There was a few comments about be aware of our limits of who we can include. And it's always a question in reform progressive communities, do we have any boundaries? Is anything goes? And the truth is that we do, though we can debate what those boundaries should be. So that this statement is meant to reflect that if you share our values, progressive reform Judaism, I believe by and large, we say welcome. We can certainly discuss that further. And the last statement, empowering our youth. The WUPJ supports the Netzer Olami, the movements. And here was the suggestion to change the title of Netzer Youth Movement to Empowering Our Youth. This throws the net wider, is more exclusive. And this could mean that, not all youth are involved in our youth organizations, but our communities still do have a lot of youth, and we want to include them as well. And also, there was a comment here in the bottom left: language of future. We don't want to talk about them as future leaders. Our youth are not future leaders. We're changing it to the present. They say present and future, and we say present. So this language is talking about youth as leadership. And my implication here is that is one kind of community. The snifim, or the different branches, and the gatherings of youth in a whole, that is one type of community, a peer group community, and that's why it's included here in the community's value. And we're providing platforms for their education and leadership development. Certainly, this includes the SHNAT program and regional gatherings and the VIDA, the international gathering that takes place from time to time. We also had a comment to take out the ages. Wasn't and it's not necessary. There's youth movement, there's young adults, and we know that also the age ranges are different in different communities, so we don't want to put a limit on that there. And it continues, we will also work with communities to integrate young people into leadership roles in the wider progressive/reform Jewish community on a local, regional, and global level. And this comment comes from a number of comments, but the one I'm including here from the feedback that we got in the reporting was this comment in the middle top right. We need to treat the youth movements as an integral part of all communities. That's one hand. And the other hand, that the comment is intergenerational communities and integrational planning. And I like those words. Also, it's a little poetic there. That when we come together community, we think, how do we interact? Correct. Different ages, different backgrounds. And integrational planning, when do we have our separate interest groups or age groups, and when do we come together as a one community, integrating different ideas, different perspectives, and more. So that is our text. And we always do a fun exercise that we run our text through ChatGPT. We like technology. As we've mentioned, give me 3 different versions of this text in 15 words. So here is what ChatGPT attempted to bring. First attempt. WPJ fosters reform/progressive Jewish values, engaging diverse communities, empowering leaders, and supporting LGBTQ+ inclusion globally. 2, WPJ champions reform/progressive Judaism, nurturing diverse leaders, embracing LGBTQ+ inclusion, and empowering global youth movements. 3, WPJ advocates reform/progressive Jewish values, fostering diverse leadership, embracing LGBT+ inclusion, and empowering global youth movements. So very interesting. ChatGPT, when we talked about inclusion, all the different inclusions, that's the one that the ChatGPT focuses on, the LGBTQ+. And it didn't really pick up that the main idea here was community. So that is a question, if it's a fault of the technology or if we need to more refine our statement. Food for thought. And the how. How do we do this? Which was, again, a big question that people were posing. So we start with sharing best practices. And these are some of the practices that people shared that they do in their communities. Some is specific, some we don't know exactly where. But some communities have professional young leadership, and perhaps their own their boards. Some communities have dedicated services and honors to celebrate inclusivity in our community. Sounds wonderful. Staff training on inclusivity. If you have young leadership, you attract young participants. So if you think about who do you want to have in your community, so you think about those are the kind of people to lead that initiatives. A newsletter that shares achievements. Twinning with another Jewish community. Could be in Israel, could be not, to start connections and also imagine exchange ideas. Meeting between local communities. Perhaps there are a few synagogues in the same town and they can get together as well. Zoom speakers from other communities, making those connections. Incorporation of different traditions and services, like from the Ethiopian tradition, Sephardic tradition. And imagine, especially if we have people who represent that in our community, that certainly helps them feel included when their traditions are not probably a part of the mainstream observances. Or maybe they could be. Special programs for kids with special needs. In Shanghai, they have a Love is Love Shabbat. Cape Town is Pride Shabbat. I'm sure a lot of us have these. Yom Kippur blessings for the partners of Jews, so including them in a very visible, very communal gathering holiday. Kinder Soul blessing. Not sure what that is, but intriguing. And Australia has a regional mentorship program. Okay, so some of the challenges shared at our Connections Roundtables. There are still many prejudices experienced globally. I wasn't 100% sure what that meant, but I'm putting it here. Not everybody can follow it because in some places, for example, welcoming openly LGBTQ+ families and individuals can be dangerous and against the law. And that was mentioned a few times. The challenge of interfaith couples, that they don't feel connected or affiliated or don't have a connection to Israel. How to spread the WPJ message. Okay, we have it, this text, great. Now what do we do with it? US and Canada don't have any youth organization after high school, no Tamar young adults. They don't join synagogues and nothing within the movement. My experience in North America is that it's really synagogue based. If you have a strong synagogue, usually in a city where young people are, but it's very individualized to synagogues and perhaps not movement wide. Halachic Jews versus interfaith. So perhaps there has to be some more that maybe that some communities have some discussions among themselves about that. When we talk about inclusion, how far do we go with inclusion? Inviting the examples from an Orthodox person who comes, will you suddenly change, and reform? Because in progressive, we use electronics, for example. Would you not do that, perhaps? Dying out of many programs. So not sure, but yeah, when a program doesn't exist anymore, and it could leave a gap that we don't have something to fill that yet. Problem with having WPJ understood in the congregation. And that's interesting how that might fit into our sense of community, but something to think about. It's here. And finally, there actually was brainstormed. I have another page. A lot of ideas were brainstormed, so I may not mention all of them. So creating safe spaces, doing education on inclusiveness, bringing youth into more professional and lay leadership roles, having pop-up minyanim for young people. So could be in different locations around the city, incorporating cultural elements, something more informal, music, programs that focus on connections and experience and taste. I imagine that means food. Food always wins with me at least. But not to focus on ritual, but to perhaps start with more social experiences. And there was a thought for more virtual experiences, more camping experiences, to support more camping experiences, which have been very positive for Jewish entry point for progressive communities. What else might we highlight here? And nurturing hiring, not just volunteers, and perhaps that's also relating to young people. And Shabbatonim, travel, and in general, make it easy for people to participate, understand what they want, make the synagogue a place where people want to meet. Perhaps thinking about what is our environment, what kind of environment are people arriving to, how our space is presented. And finally, all of this is an invitation for further discussion, ideological discussion, to look at the text and to come up with new ideas for it. Practical discussion. What do we learn from these successes? Where do we want to collaborate together? With whom we might want to collaborate, and how we might further develop a sense of community where we live.